Am I on? Okay. All right. Good morning. All right. All right. We are in Matthew chapter 23. I'm going to kind of zip through this chapter instead of catching all the different woes. Again, Matthew 23. I'm just going to start. Then Jesus said to the crowd and his disciples, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So you must obey them and do everything they tell you. So if you remember, Moses' seat is a place in the synagogue that the rabbi or whoever is teaching that day will sit down in that seat once they are teaching. And you know when they sit down that they are now sort of like making pronouncements that are important. If we remember when we talked about the Sermon on the Mount, quote unquote, it says that Jesus sat down. And that is a reference to sitting down in the seat of Moses. That, the rabbi is sitting down now, so what he's saying is extra important. Everyone needs to listen. So Jesus is referencing this here, saying, when the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat, obey them, because the person who sits in Moses' seat is now speaking words that God wants spoken. But don't do what they do, because they don't practice what they preach. They tie up heavy loads and put them on men's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. Everything they do is done for men to see. They make their phylacteries wide. If you all know what the phylacteries are, it's what they would wear on their wrists and on the forehead, which had scriptures in them. Again, this comes from the Mosaic Law in Leviticus. And so they would make them very obvious, oh, look at me, I'm more pious than anyone else. My phylactery, look how many words I've got on mine. He says they do this just to be seen, and they wear their tassels on their garments very long. And again, that's another thing, back to a messianic expectation, was that whoever the Messiah was, sort of power would flow from him. If you remember the woman who wanted to touch the garment, the hem of Jesus' garment, that's a reference to these tassels, because she believed he was the Messiah, and just by touching the tassels she would be healed. Okay, and he's saying that basically they wear their tassels long, like, hey, I might be the Messiah. If you brush against, someone might brush against me and be healed, and then we'll know that I'm the Messiah. And that's what he's saying here. And they love the place. They love the places of honor at banquets and the most important seats in synagogue. They love to be greeted in the marketplace and have men call them rabbi. You are not to be called rabbi. You only have one master, and you are all brothers. Don't call anyone on earth father, if you only have one Father, and he is in heaven. Don't be called teacher, for you have one teacher, the Christ. The greatest among you will be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled. Whoever humbles himself will be exalted. And then he goes into 7 woes against the Pharisees, which I'm not really going to go through just for the interest of time. But he basically says, you guys are losers. Okay. He calls them for what they are. You're a bunch of hypocrites, and you use the knowledge you have not to enhance other people or to help further the kingdom or the nation. You use it for your own power. And that's disgusting. And again, we've seen this throughout history. And the Gnostics, who are going to come along about a century later, they're the same way. They say they have secret knowledge about Jesus, and so they are more pious, they're more religious, and if you follow them, you might actually gain the secret knowledge someday. And again, it's all just a question of pride and arrogance and a desire to have power over other people so they can, frankly, live however they want, and then feel superior to people around them. I remember a film, I don't remember the name of it. I remember Al Pacino was in it, and he was playing Satan. And I just remember at one point, he turns and he looks at the camera because he'd gotten a character to do something. And he turned and looked at the camera and says, vanity is my favorite sin. Because the person had done something good, and then he convinced them to be proud of it. He said, yeah, vanity is my favorite sin. that's a fictional script, of course, but I think there's a lot of truth in that, because I think Satan can get into our mind and heart and literally turn something that we've done that was good and turn it into something that's evil, because we then, look at me, instead of look at what God has done. Okay, again, I'm just going to sort of skip over the woes and head on to chapter 24, unless someone wants to ask a specific question about the woes. I mean, they're all pretty straightforward and obvious, And again, I just think there's a warning here to us. We need to be careful. Again, vanity and selfishness are they're the basis of so many sins, and making myself an idol is so easy to do. Okay, moving on. Matthew 24 says, Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him and to call attention to its buildings. Do you see all these things, he asked? I tell you the truth. Not one stone here will be left on another. Every one of them will be thrown down. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Now, the Mount of Olives that means they're out of Jerusalem now. Okay, so they're passing the temple, and now they've left Jerusalem. They've gone through the valley, can't remember the name of it, and up the Mount of Olives, which is to the east of Jerusalem, if I remember my directions well. We're going to see him again on the Mount of Olives, of course, before long. And they come to him and say, tell us when all this will happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and signs of the end of the age. Now, this is a passage that gets a lot of crazy attention. I think I've said before that my dad we lived in several different cities, and my dad was an elder 5 different times. And invariably, there would be questionnaires to the congregation. What do you want to study? What books, what subjects, blah, blah, blah. And invariably, some people would write down difficult passages. And my father would snicker and say, I would love to teach a class on difficult passages. I know that they mean the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation and certain things like Matthew 24. And he said, those aren't difficult passages. They're not difficult because I don't really understand what's there. There are signs in there, and there are pictorial things that I don't know what they are. Why am I bothering with it? Difficult passages are the ones that I know very well what they mean. And they're calling me to act and change my life. That's a difficult passage, okay? But this passage, scholars get all crazy about. And frankly, crazy people get all crazy about, okay? And they start assigning, Stalin is so-and-so, or, Hitler is so-and-so, or Putin is so-and-so, or Donald Trump is so-and-so, et cetera, et cetera. And honestly, really, are you really worried about that? Well, what difference does it make? Remember when we get to the end and God wins? Why are we worried about this? Okay? Now, having said that, what exactly in this passage is just about the destruction of Jerusalem and what exactly is about the end when Jesus comes back is very difficult to figure what's what. And I'm not even going to try to separate out. I'm just going to go to the obvious stuff. Okay? So he talks about, right in verse 4, watch out that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name, claiming I am the Messiah, and will deceive many. You will hear wars and rumors of wars. See to it you're not alarmed, which is why I say, why get crazy about this stuff? Okay? See to it that you're not alarmed. Such things must happen, and the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom will rise against kingdom. There'll be famines, earthquakes in various places. All of those are the beginning of birth pains. Then you'll be handed over to be persecuted, be put to death. You'll be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and betray and hate each other, and many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Now, he's talking about immediate right now. okay, in my opinion. I don't think he's talking about, oh, these are like the last few weeks of the world. He's talking about this is about to happen, okay? Because of the increase in wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, but he who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So a lot of scholars point to that and say, see, he's talking about right away, because what's going to happen pretty quickly is persecution is going to come, first from the Jews and then from the Romans, and the Christians are going to have to scatter, and hence the gospel will be spread to the world that much faster. Now, okay, verse 15. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the roof of his house go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get his cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath. For then it will be great distress, unequal from the beginning of the world until now, never to be equaled again. Now, the abomination that brings desolation comes from the book of Daniel. Did I not write down the verse? Well, okay. Anyway, it's the book of Daniel, and it's already been fulfilled once, okay? When the Greeks came and took over Jerusalem, we had this lovely fellow from the Seleucids named Antiochus IV Epiphanes. And he was, frankly, an awful human being in every way. He laid siege to Judea. He took over he took over Jerusalem. He took over all of Israel. And he went and he set up a statue of Zeus in the temple. And then he sacrificed a pig there just to make sure that the Jews understood that this place is no longer yours. It's mine now, okay? And he ordered an end to all the Jewish ritual sacrifices. Anyone who offered one of the ritual sacrifices would be put to death on the spot. And he demanded that all the Jews begin to worship Zeus and offer sacrifices to Zeus. Again, there is some arrogance and pride in this because he said he was the physical manifestation of Zeus on earth. Okay, so come worship me was Antiochus' thing. Okay, all of this led to the Maccabean revolt. Okay, that we talked about before. Simon and Judas Maccabees led an uprising, and they got enough people. They went and they overthrew Antiochus and overthrew the Seleucids, and then again they returned, and we have that triumphal entry that then Jesus repeats. Okay, so this is about 150, 160 years before what we're talking about now that all that happened, okay? And it was assumed that the abomination that causes desolation was Antiochus because he did the things that are marked in Daniel about causing desolation, what would happen to the temple. But now Jesus is saying, watch out for the abomination that causes desolation, okay? They all know what that is. And they know who it referred to 150, 160 years ago. But Jesus is telling them it's all going to happen again. That's what he's telling them, okay? So understand, when you see this, get out, all right? So we're going to fast forward to AD 66 and then AD 70, all right? So in AD 66, we've got yet another revolution, okay? And did I even put all this in here? Yeah, okay. So Jesus tells them there will be many people coming saying, I'm the Messiah, don't be fooled, right? And there were. So this line came to me. It's one of Pilate's lines in Jesus Christ Superstar. And he says to the Jews, he says, this is your Messiah. You Jews produce Messiahs by the sackful. What's so special about this one? You know, and I always thought that was a weird line, and then I began to learn history. It's like, oh, he really wasn't kidding. So about, let's see, in about 12 years from Jesus saying this, a fellow named Theudas is going to come along, claim he's the Messiah, raise an uprising against Rome, and then get killed by the Romans. Okay? He claims he's the Messiah, and he says, I want all the people to come down to the Jordan River. Through the power of God, I'm going to part the Jordan River so that you know I am the Messiah. Well, the Romans find out about this, and so he leads all these people, and they go down to the Jordan River, and there's an army waiting for them, and they just slaughter them. Okay? And then we have Menahem ben Judah. Now, he is the son of Judah of Galilee, who possibly is referred to at one point in the Gospels, because Judah of Galilee also claimed to be the Messiah. In 86, he led a revolt against Quirinus. He got killed too. So around AD 66, we have several competing messiahs going on. We have Menahem ben Judah, we have John of Gischala, and we have Simon Bar Jorah, all of which are claiming to be the Messiah. And they're all fighting against each other more than they're fighting against Rome. Menahem ben Judah actually killed Ananias. Okay, we read about Ananias, the high priest. Okay, he killed him off, and then he came into Jerusalem to proclaim himself high priest and king. But Ananias' son Eleazar was waiting for him and killed him. So we've got these Jewish factions killing each other, and there's just all kinds of violence going on, and it's just causing such upheaval. And the Roman government over in Rome sends word, hey, we're tired of this, okay? Stop, or we're just going to put a stop to all of you. Well, it doesn't stop, okay? And so you've still got John of Gischala and Simon Bar Jorah warring against each other and doing little raids against the local Romans. And so Rome sends Cestius Gallus, and he laid siege to Jerusalem in AD 66, okay? And is he the abomination that causes desolation, or is it Titus? Again, scholars are unclear. So Cestius doesn't actually take the city. He should have, but for no apparent reason, he suddenly retreats. He thinks the Jews are about to, like, trick him and overcome him, pull a sort of Napoleon move, where he's been led in and then they'll surround and trap him. That didn't happen at all, but he was sort of convinced. And he was literally against the walls of Jerusalem, and I mean, they probably would have fallen in a day or two. And he had all his standards up against the walls and stuff like that, right next to where the temple is, but they never got to the temple. And again, suddenly they retreated and went back to Rome and said, they kind of outfoxed us, okay? I don't really know what happened to him. I'm sure nothing good. And so the revolts continued with these various messiahs fighting with each other. And in AD 69, Titus Andronicus leads a new army of Romans, and by AD 70, he overtakes the city. And he comes in and he goes right into the temple with all of the Romans. So most scholars say, okay, he is the new abomination that causes desolation, because he's a Gentile walking right into the holy place, and he even went into the Holy of Holies, started tearing up the curtains and destroying everything. So that's an abomination. Only the high priest is supposed to be in there, right? Okay? And just as Jesus said, not one stone is left. They literally tear the temple down completely. And they just absolutely sack Jerusalem. They don't destroy Jerusalem yet, but they did a pretty good job of it, okay? And according to several historians, including Josephus, when they saw Titus Andronicus at the walls and realized what was happening, most of the Christian Jews left Jerusalem. They said, this is the moment. This is what Jesus was talking about. We're supposed to go. Let's go. And again, according to the historian Reed, somewhere between 85 to 90% of the Christian Jews left Jerusalem, and so they didn't get killed. Titus Andronicus killed over 1 million people in the city of Jerusalem. Okay, at least 3 different historians say 1,100,000 plus. Yeah. Very, very possibly. Okay, so again, sometimes prophecies are fulfilled more than once, right? So I think very definitely it refers to Antiochus because he very much did those things, and he made a mess of Jerusalem, and then Titus Andronicus comes and does the same thing. It could be a reference to all three, absolutely. Okay, yeah,
Every time we make the Messiah in our own image, that's what we started doing. We didn't like the way the Messiah came.
that's right.
We didn't like what he did. He didn't do what we wanted him to do. So we're just going to keep making new ones in our own image until it works.
There you go, right? Exactly. Jesus can't be the Messiah. He didn't overthrow Rome, you know? He's supposed to, like, overthrow all the Gentiles, and there will be peace on earth because we've killed everyone, basically. And he didn't do that. So we need a new Messiah. Okay, well, I think I can overthrow the Romans, so I'll be the new Messiah. And yeah, and so we get Messiahs made in the image of what the people want. And it doesn't go well.
Their gods are so bad because they created them literally in their own image.
Exactly, right. Exact same thing, yeah. Yeah, if you guys know the history of the Greek and the Roman gods, they are messed up. You know, like, think of the worst people you've ever thought of, and then double that, and now you've got a Roman or Greek god. And again, God's made in the image of the people, rather than people being made in the image of God. It's a really good point. And then after this, basically, Jesus just tells them, look, all is going to happen. There's going to be stuff. Just be diligent, okay? Don't worry about the end. The end will come when it comes. You'll see the Son of Man coming in the clouds, okay? Just be diligent. Run the race. Don't tire in doing good. Don't be fooled by the world. Don't turn to greed or malice or self-indulgence. The day of the Lord will come when it comes, right? Just be diligent, and you don't have to worry about that. And I think that's a really good message for us forever. Again, some folks in modern times want to assign this thing and this thing in Revelation, and so there was one just a couple of months ago. There was some group that said, the world's going to end on, I forget what date it was, and didn't happen. Oh, we did our math wrong. It's actually next year. I don't know what they said. But it's been going on forever. There was a big book in the 70s. I don't even remember the name of it, and it was all about the end of the world. I mean, it was like thick, and this guy had it all figured out. And the world was going to end in like 1976 or 77, I don't remember, and didn't happen. Okay. Again, we don't know what time. And I had a friend once when we lived in New Jersey, and he said, I don't think we have to worry about the end of the world coming at any time soon because there's so many people in the world who've decided that it's X such a day, so it can't be any of those days because then they'd be proven right. So we got a long time. Okay. But again, it's our job to be diligent. And Jesus doesn't have to come back for there to be judgment day for me. I'm going to die someday. Jesus may come and take us all before that, or I'm going to pass away. Either way, judgment day is coming for all of us, So if I look at it that way, then why am I worried about whether Jesus is coming back soon or not? I could get hit by a bus as I walk out the door today, and judgment day is here for me now, right? So again, Jesus is just telling the disciples, be diligent. Just be diligent. Don't worry about all this stuff that's going to be thrown at you and all these people who come and say, I'm the Messiah, and want to lead you down a false road. Ignore all that. Be diligent. Do what I've told you to do. And then he gives some parables of the end, which really is saying the same thing again, okay? So he tells the parables of the 10 virgins in Matthew 25. And again, basically, the message is, do what you're supposed to do, Keep doing the work of the Lord. And when the time comes, you'll be ready. If you're goofing around, because that's what we have in the 10, we've got the parable of the virgins, okay? And 5 of them are foolish and 5 of them are wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, didn't take any oil with them. The wise took extra oil. And then the bridegroom is a long time in coming. They all drowsy and fall asleep. And the 5 who didn't take any oil, their lamps don't burn anymore, right? Because they got no oil left. And then they come and they want to open the door. He says, man, I tell you the truth, I don't know who you are. Okay? So again, it's just the same message. Keep watch. You don't know when the hour is going to come. Be diligent. Live for God every day. And then we have the parable of the talents or the bags of gold, depending on your translation. And again, it's really the same message once again. All right? I've left you the gospel. I've left you tools. I've given you individually talents to use these things for the kingdom. And you've got the one guy who's like, well, I got the one talent and I just buried it, And he says, are you stupid? Basically, what is wrong with you? You do not understand how this works. And it's taken from him and given to the one who has the most talent, right? And a friend said, God, that seems unfair. The one who had the most got more? We'll understand what he's saying. It's not about what he's getting. It's about what's happening for the kingdom, right? So just going back to lay up treasures in heaven. The one's getting more because he's spreading the news of the kingdom. And the more that he's getting are more people for the kingdom of heaven. Now, he's not getting stripes on his arm or, little gold bars in heaven. That's not how it works. Okay, we go back to the tenant workers. The reward's the same. Whether we went first thing in the morning or we went the 11th hour, salvation is salvation, right? And we need to use our talents to spread to the people who don't have it yet. And if I'm not doing that, then I've probably lost mine in the process because I'm not living what Jesus told me to live. This is what he calls us to. Again, in the Jewish law, it was give 10%, tithe everything. And Jesus says, give me your life. It's a much bigger commitment, right? And it's something we have to do every day. And then in case we haven't gotten the message yet, he brings us to the parable of the sheep and the goats, okay? And, I go back to Ephesians 2:10. He's left good deeds in our path to do every day, and we need to do them. He expects us to do them. But if we're busy propping ourselves up, and again, look how pious I am, look how religious I am, but I'm not doing the work, then I'm really going against his will, okay? And I think when he comes to the other ones and says, you saw me hungry and fed me, you saw me naked and clothed me, and they're like, when did we do that? I think when you're really doing the work, you don't really even notice, honestly. Sometimes you don't even know how you've blessed someone. There was an instance, I used to travel and sing for a living. There was an instance I was in New Hampshire, and there was a little congregation, and they didn't have a preacher. They didn't have really, they didn't have anyone they could pay. They didn't have enough money. And so men in the congregation would switch off sermon and song leading, and of course they heard me the first time I was there. Do you want to lead singing next week? Oh, sure, okay. And then I led singing. The next week, do you ever preach? Okay. Sure. And I gave a sermon on the first miracle, with the water turned into wine. And 4 different people came up to me afterwards and said, you have no idea how many people you healed today with that sermon. They never told me why. They never told me what I had said. They didn't tell me what the issue was. But you know, I just went and I said, sure, why not? And I did a thing, and God used me that day. And to this day, I have no idea what it was that I said that was healing, because again, no one ever told me what the issue was. But those things happen, you know, and it's very cool, and most of the time you don't even find out. I remember a friend of mine who was a youth minister in New Orleans when we were there, and he called his youth minister and said, I want you to come in and just do a little you know, seminar, if you will, over the weekend, because I want you to meet all these kids that you're ministering to. And Ed said, what do you mean that I'm ministering to? Well, you ministered to me, and now I'm ministering to them. They wouldn't be being ministered to by them if you hadn't ministered to me. And I'm largely teaching them the things that you taught me. So I would love to have you come in and meet some of these kids that you've ministered to and you don't even know it, you know? And again, that's just so cool. That is so amazing and awesome how the kingdom works. And again, I can't help but read that when Jesus says, when the people said, what do you mean we fed you or clothed? When did we do that? You know, they don't even really know. That's just so awesome. And if it becomes our habit and just the way we are, then we just bless people, and it just becomes habitual, you know. Again, anything can become a habit, a good or a bad, you know. And I fight against the bad habits and try and instill good habits. Okay, I'm going to move on. Matthew 26. All right, so we've got a plot now, the plot to kill Jesus, all right? So in Matthew 26, when Jesus had finished saying all these things, he said to the disciples, as you know, Passover is 2 days away, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified. Then the chief priests and the elders of the people assembled in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and they plotted to arrest Jesus in some sly way and kill him, but not during the feast, they said, or there may be a riot among the people. So, interestingly enough, they don't want to do it during the Passover, but they end up doing it during the Passover, which tells you who killed Jesus? Jesus did. Jesus laid down his life. No one took it from him. He says, no one takes it from me. I lay it down, right? The priests here are like, we want to get rid of this guy, but we're not going to do it during the Passover because that would be bad. There might be a riot. Things could go badly. But the plan is for it to happen during the Passover. So they end up doing it anyway. Okay? Because God has his timetable, and we can try and fight against it all we want. We aren't going to win. Right? Okay. Then there's the anointing in Bethany. While Jesus was in Bethany, verse 6. While Jesus was in the Bethany in the home of a man known as Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste, they said. This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor. Aware of this, Jesus says, why are you bothering this woman? She's done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. I tell you the truth, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she's done will also be told in memory of her. Okay, so a couple of things. We have no idea who Simon the leper was. This is the first and last mention of him. Now, many scholars and historians make an assumption that this is probably someone Jesus healed, because a leper is not going to be having people over to the house. And no one's going over to the house of a leper, okay, because that is verboten. That is not, you don't do that. That's totally forbidden. A leper does not invite you into his home, and you do not go into the home of a leper, lest you contract leprosy, okay? And again, the leprosy of this time apparently is not what we call leprosy, okay? It's two different things, according to many scholars. It might be, there's a thing out, it's called like flesh-eating bacteria. I don't remember what it's called. That might be what this is. We don't really know. It's just one of those things that's kind of lost to history. But this fellow is having people, there's a gathering at his home. So obviously he is no longer a leper. But he's known as Simon the leper, probably because he's the man who's been healed of leprosy. Okay? Again, that's guesswork on the part of scholars, but it makes some sense. All right? And again, it's probably a case of assumed knowledge. Again, Matthew is writing to first century people, writing specifically to Jewish people. He doesn't have to say certain things because they already know that. Again, my example is, if I was to say, in the 80s, the president said, Mr. Gorbachev, take down this wall. I don't have to tell you his name, do I? Everyone knows who said that, okay? But if I was to reference something that happened like shortly after the Civil War, and it was, say, U.S. Grant who was president, I'm going to say Grant said so-and-so, because most of us wouldn't know the timetable, 18 such and such. I got no idea who was president then. Do you know who took history class recently? So I would say specifically. But when you're writing to people who already know stuff, you don't bother to write down a lot of details that they already know. Why waste the effort? They already know what that means. Okay. So this is probably a case of assumed knowledge. Oh, Simon the leper. Of course, everyone knows who Simon the leper was. Well, 2,000 years later, we don't really know who he was. But anyway, now Matthew just says this is a woman, but in John's gospel, he notes that it's Mary, sister of Martha, who did this. We don't know what Mary's motivation for anointing Jesus is. It never says that. Jesus says that she did it to prepare his body for burial. Okay? Maybe that was her motivation. We don't know. But it's what was done. So Jewish women at that time often wore these alabaster flasks as a necklace. It probably held some sort of family or religious significance. Again, no one's really uncovered anything that tells us exactly why they wore them. We just know that a lot of women wore them. It may be that those alabaster flasks were used to prepare like a family member for burial. Again, we don't really know. It's totally guesswork on our part because we don't have anything, any archaeological dig that's given us evidence what exactly they were for. So it's totally guesswork on our part. But it's possible that's one of the things. And so therefore, when he says she did this to prepare my body for burial, they would understand, oh, yeah, you do that with the alabaster flask. Again, that's guesswork on scholars, so don't take that as gospel. The Bible does not say that. It's just guesswork. But the stuff was expensive, okay? And realize that it's probably probably close to a year's worth of salary to buy this, okay? And families would save up and have it. And so the other disciples what on earth are you doing, right? And Jesus says, she just prepared me for burial. Do you remember what I've been telling you guys about what's going to happen when we come into Jerusalem? Remember maybe just yesterday I said 2 more days? So, what exactly the flask has significance-wise or not, the lesson is that Jesus is worth more than anything on earth. Doesn't matter how expensive it is. Knowing Jesus is worth more because knowing Jesus is eternal. Anything on this earth gets left, You can have the most expensive thing ever made, and when you die, you don't have it anymore. But Jesus is eternal. I always run out of time. All right, moving on to 14 through 16. Judas goes to seek out the priests and asks what they'll do for him if he gives Jesus to them. So they promise him 30 pieces of silver, which is yet another fulfillment of prophecy from the scriptures. In Zechariah 11, God commands Zechariah to shepherd the flock that is marked for slaughter by their owners. In Zechariah, this is a sign of how the priesthood and the leaders of Israel and Judah at the time abuse their people and give their own people over to slaughter by other nations. And the priests pay Zechariah 30 pieces of silver for tending the flock that they intend to slaughter. And then God tells Zechariah, you throw that money to the potter at the house of the Lord, because God is angry over the handsome prince at which they value God, a term spoken in irony. And again, this is another sign saying the priesthood at that time, they're just murderers of God's people. And of course, Jesus has already called them that now. And so, as we're going to find out, Judas relents eventually. I've lost my place, didn't I? Oh, not good. Okay. Judas relents and goes back and says, take the money back. And they were like, hey, man, I've turned it into innocent person. That's your deal, man. Live with it. And he throws the money into the temple, and they give it to a potter to buy the field where Judas hung himself. So, again, Zechariah, how many hundreds of years before we get this exact sign being played out? Okay. Oh boy. I will start this. I won't finish. So now in verse 17 through 29, we have the Lord's Supper. Fortunately, we're not in the Gospel of John because this could take several weeks because most of the Gospel is about the Last Supper. Jesus has obviously already prepared a place beforehand, and he sends them to tell them. And honestly, we could spend a class or two going over all the symbols of the Seder meal and their applications to the Messiah, because every single thing in a Seder meal points to the Messiah. It's really quite amazing. But I'm just going to concentrate on the two sacraments that move over into the Lord's Supper. So matzah is unleavened bread. It's made from 5 grains: wheat, rye, barley, oats, and spelt. 5 books of the Torah. Okay. While matzah is eaten at other times, on Pesach or Passover, it's the only bread that is eaten. No yeast is to be anywhere. This is how you make matzah. You just leave the yeast out. Okay. And again, it's a sign that we are trying to remove sin from our lives. Matzah is called the bread of faith because matzah and mitzvah, which a mitzvah is a commandment, they're very similar. They're spelled almost exactly alike in Hebrew. And so it's known as the bread of faith. But it's also called the bread of affliction, representing the difficult lives that the Jews had while they were slaves of Egypt. When you make matzah, you have to poke it several times with a fork or something so that it won't get air bubbles in it. And then when you cook it, as you can see in the picture, these little brown sort of stripes come up. So it reminds the people of being whipped, the stripes, and being prodded by the poking. Okay. Do I need to say how this points to Jesus? He's going to be flogged, and the nails are going through him. There he is. He's the bread of life. And then the wine. Got about a minute. There are 5 cups of wine during a Seder meal, and they all represent promises from Exodus 6, verse 6, where it says, God says, say therefore to the people of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will deliver you from their bondage. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and great acts of judgments. I will take you for my people, and I will be your God. And you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who has brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. And I will bring you into the land which I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I will give it to you for a possession. I am the Lord. Okay, so I've got 5 cups representing these 5 promises. The first cup, well, I'm just going to skip. The second cup is called the cup of wrath. All right, never mind. I'll pick up there next time. Look at the 5 cups. I knew I'd run out of time. We'll start with the 5 cups next week because they're all quite fascinating. Again, all point to what Jesus is about to do for us.